Wonderful. Thank you, Mohan. We've crossed 200 people, so congratulations on the double century. All right. So, first of all, I'd also like to thank my alma mater, Stanford, which has very kindly consented to give us this technology platform. You know, we usually hold our meetings in Google Meet, but they only allow 250 people, and I think we'll be crossing that very, very soon. Thank you to all the attendees, everybody who's coming in and attending the seminar, and a special and a very big thank you to all the speakers, to Virginia, Apurva, and to Hari. I'm very excited to host this webinar today, learn from you. I think there will be so many tips that I would love to pick up and improve my professional brand. And also, I think all the people that will come in will also tremendously benefit from this. My name is Jatin Moody. I'm the founder and CEO of Frogideas. It's a focused B2B marketing company, the first in the country. You know, you can find out more about us from our website. In our webinars and in all the content that we do, you know, our biggest focus is to give back to the community, to produce content which is authentic, which is real, which comes from the heart, which is not you know, practiced or masked. And we try and get the best speakers in the community. Last week we had a phenomenal webinar about marketing in the times of coronavirus, where Rajesh, Krishnan, and Deepa from UiPath, SAP, and LinkedIn respectively had come in. That also saw an incredible response. Today we'll be doing, you know, I think one of the very relevant topics, which is on investing in your professional brand. And a lot of people have been asking me why this webinar and why this is so relevant at the moment. You know, when I was at Stanford, my professor used to say that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And today with digital and all the digital proliferation that we've seen, it's so much more, because you don't even need to be in the room for people to start perceiving you in a certain way. You know, one believes that especially in a crisis like this, one is able to appreciate the fact that you need to be way more than just your designation. And I think somewhere between that and the expression and understanding of your purpose, values, lies your brand. Just before I go forward, I just want to make sure for a couple of requests, if you can just put yourself on mute if you're not the speaker. We will open up for questions later on. So, and if you have questions during the session, please feel free to put them on the chat section. I will try and weave that in the conversation in case that question is not getting covered. You know, in a crisis like this, what happens is that person who is able to create an incredible professional brand is able to lead their company, themselves, their teams in a fashion which is the need of the hour. And they're able to forge partnerships, they're able to create community, I'm sorry, Abhinav, could you please take care of making sure that people are on mute, and you can mute them yourself in case that's not happening. Thanks. So, you know, this equity allows them to build partnerships, to display leadership, both externally and internally. And they are more likely to be valued by their peers, by their colleagues, by their bosses, by their investors. And I think it could not have been more relevant than at this time to talk about a topic like this. To talk about this, we have a phenomenal panel today. I'm scratching my mind to think of a panel better than this for a topic like this. And I'm also scratching my mind to find a better panel that I would have seen in all the 14 years of my business career, you know, because they're so incredible. To introduce first, we've got Virginia Sharma. She was the ex-sales director at LinkedIn. She's just stepped down. You know, she's an alumnus of New York University. She was part of the senior leadership team at LinkedIn in India. She's also the first chairperson for the Marketing Society. the India chapter of the Marketing Society, a member of the Global Advisory Board for UVA's McIntyre School of Commerce. She was awarded the Economic Times Women Ahead in 2018, and she's been a LinkedIn Power Profile 5 years in a row. I'm told that she has 30,000 followers on LinkedIn. So this has to be something that she's doing really, really well. I think there is more to her beyond what I've just said, and we will discover that as we go along. My second guest today is Hari, T.N. Hari. He's an IIT Madras and IIM Calcutta alumnus. He's currently the head of HR at Big Basket. And I think most of you in the audience would have been ordering from Big Basket in these extraordinary times that we live in. As I was saying, my first Alfonso mangoes came from Big Basket. So thank you, Hari. I can't express your thanks enough in that. He's a strategic advisor at Fundamentium, which is a late stage venture capital fund set up by Nandan Nilekani and Sanjeev Agarwal. In the last 32 years, he has worked with Tata Steel for the first 14 years of his career. And over the last 18 years, he has worked with multiple startups and scale-ups and has been through 4 successful exits in different industries. He's also a successful author. His last book was a bestseller, which you might have seen when airports were still open, which was called Saying No to Jugaad, The Making of Big Basket. He's also written 2 more books, and his next book is slated for publication in August, which is called From Pony to a Sustainable Unicorn. He was a LinkedIn Power Profile 3 years in a row. So welcome, Hari, and very, very glad to have you here.
Thank you, Jatin.
My third guest is Apurva. Apurva Chamaria is the Chief Revenue Officer at RateGain. He's an alum of the Harvard Business School and was recognized by Economic Times as amongst the top 10 angel investors in 2019. Some of his investments are very well-known companies like Innovate, which exited to Oyo, Lucidis, which is a cybersecurity firm, Making 42, which is very well-known in the marketing space. He's also written a bestseller on social selling called You Are the Key, and his last book was on growth hacking with some of the top entrepreneurs in India. He's also a philanthropist. He's co-founded showcause.org to make healthcare accessible in India. And this is a abridged version of all their profiles, because if I read out all their profiles in their entirety, it would have taken half the session in itself. So welcome, Apurva, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jatin.
So first things first, and I'm going to pose this question to all of you. I think there is a lot of content about professional brands, about personal brands online. I think it's important for us to really understand the building blocks of how this happens. And I suppose my first question to you is, what was your journey and what is your story of becoming a brand? How did you amass all these people following you? What did you do right? What is your story? So maybe we can start with the lady first. Virginia, if you can start us off, please.
Yeah, so first of all, this is great. I love the attendance, love all the familiar faces. So if we are connected on LinkedIn and I've seen your name before and you've seen me, it's nice to meet you finally. So my story actually started about 10 years ago when I first moved to India. And I think, at that point, this idea of branding and stuff was just what you read in, MBA books and what you did at work. And this idea of influencers and stuff didn't really make sense to me. But 2 things happened when I moved to India. One is blogging was big. So some of you may remember WordPress. This was pre-LinkedIn publisher tool days where people would blog. And I used Blogspot, which was the poor little sister of WordPress, because that's all I knew how to code. And I would share stories about sort of my adventures of being new to living in India. And, I couldn't get a credit card. I couldn't get a phone. I couldn't, I couldn't get basic things done. And after having lived overseas, this was my big, great Indian adventure. And so I started a blog called Desi CMO. And it was at the time that actually I talked about how technology and marketing could help make things a little easier for people who just landed on Earth, right? So if you just showed up in India and you didn't realize it was so hard to get a credit card in 2009. Like, you know, what could technology have done to make my life easier? So that was my long form post journey. And, you know, people liked it, you know, and it was great because back then, if you got, you know, 100 people to read your blog and like 3 people to comment, that was cool. Somebody out there cares about you. I also didn't have that many friends at that time. I was relatively new to the country. The second thing that happened, which is more interesting, which made me, I think, more famous, is that I moved back for my mom. And those of you who know, I'm Punjabi, and my mom, I would go visit her and have a cup of tea in the evenings after work. And I hadn't lived with my mom in 15 years. And she would have these conversations on the phone while I would be having a cup of tea that was so tweetable. And if Pummy Auntie showed up 10 years later, like my mom was the original Pummy Auntie. And she made me famous, actually. So I had a hashtag back then called Punjabi Mom Tweets. And it really, I think my claim to fame, I think somebody's topless, by the way. I just want to make sure that I say that before it ends up going viral. And
actually, can I request anybody who's not the speaker to go off video, because we want to conserve bandwidth, and also to make sure that you're on mute. And I think if people are off video, it's going to take care of any other you know, unforeseen visuals.
Viral Zoom videos going around.
Yeah.
So coming back to that, which is, you know, my story really starts with, you know, Twitter and my journey of moving to India, being around my parent. And at no point was I thinking I want to become a brand. It was an expression. It was an, you know, an outlet for expression of how I was thinking and feeling. And people resonated with that because a lot of people kind of saw themselves on that same journey.
Wonderful. That's great. I mean, I can't even imagine, knowing you now, Virginia, how you would be running a Punjabi mom speaks kind of a channel. It's like really difficult to imagine that, but very, very interesting. Hari, what's your story been?
So Jatin, you know, people who I've worked with or knew before 2015 would hardly believe that I'm the kind who would ever network or even had the capability to network or even build a brand. And people who know me after 2015 would believe that I have some of the strongest and deepest networks ever. So I think I made the transition in 2015. All along, I was known at my workplace as someone who was a quick responder, thought clearly, and got things done. And I've been through 4 successful exits, played a role in shaping their growth as well as exits. And I focused very internally, which is building the companies that I worked for. So that was my entire focus. All my energies were devoted to building the companies that I worked for and making them great. But in 2015, you know, I realized that I'm talking to entrepreneurs for the first time who are about 30 years old. Prior to that, all the entrepreneurs I interacted with were 40 plus. And this 10 years, I think, made a lot of difference. I discovered that many of these entrepreneurs, by just not having gone through several life experiences, don't get some things which are obvious and evident to people like me who've gone through this before. So I began sharing them, you know, in a very, you know, I thought I should in some ways give back as well. And I began writing on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn was a, you know, user-generated content-based platform. So it made it easy. And I realized that my writings resonated with a lot of people because they were not fluff, they were not theoretical, they were entirely based from my personal experiences. So I think I began getting good responses, and it builds on itself eventually. You know, you write well, people respond, and then you begin to write better. And then after that, I began writing books. I realized that, you know, why not share whatever I've learned in the form of books as well. So began writing books, wrote the first book, Cut the Crap and Jargon Lessons from Startup Trenches with Shraddha of Your Story. Wrote the next book, which is about, you know, India's quest for prosperity, cutting the Gordian knot. And then, you know, this book about saying no to Jugaad and, you know, pony to unicorn. All of these were based on my personal experiences, as a result of which I didn't have to spend a lot of time doing research or talking to a lot of people. It was just getting my personal thoughts out there. So I think in the process, the brand got built, I'm assuming. I never ever aspired to build a brand. That never was my motive. It is still not my motive. I'm very understated. I'm a very shy person, very reserved. I am an introvert by nature, and I don't enjoy going out and meeting a lot of new people. But in the last 5 years, I think things have changed. I love meeting interesting people from all walks of life, writing about them, listening to their stories, And I think I've been a good listener. I think it's very important not to just talk about what you feel, but also listen to a lot of people. I was be inspired also by, Shraddha, of your story, which is about, everyone has a story to tell, and I realized that in the last 5 years, everyone, has a great story to tell. They just need that someone who can tell that story. In some ways, I also have become a storyteller for a lot of other people. I encourage the young entrepreneurs. I am a cheerleader for them. I write on their behalf. I will never ever look for a job because of my brand. Never. It will never ever be a way of looking for a job. I will always pick my job very thoughtfully and very differently. So this brand, I think, is helping the people I work with, and that gives me joy. That broadly is my story, Jatin.
So more of an organic way of building the brand. You didn't
Yes,
plan
yes.
it. I think it's just
Not at all.
all the
Nothing in my
expertise.
life is planned. Nothing in my life is planned, Jatin,
It's
including
very
this.
interesting. So it's more like a whatever expertise you had, you just wanted to share it all the time, and
Correct.
people resonated with that somehow.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
interesting. And Apurva, Apurva is a dear friend, and I remember he just came back from the US, and we spoke at a conference together, and that was, I think, 7 or 8 years back, where he was just back maybe a month ago, or maybe a couple of months before that. He was working with HCL that time. Apurva, your rise of brand in India has been stratospheric. What's your story been in India?
So Jatin, I have always been a very reluctant speaker. And even while I was at school, I was the kid who would go on the stage, fumble, forget the lines, and would really be terrified of speaking. And that carried on, I think, for a long while. And I started a career in marketing. I was in a pharmaceutical company, which was, one-to-one sales. You're meeting doctors, or you're a brand manager, managing a small brand. Then I moved to tech with HCL in 2005 and started my career in tech marketing. 2009, I moved to US, and possibly one of the hardest times to move to a new geography and build a career in tech sales. So, December 17th, 2008, Lehman Brothers had just happened, and the market was vaporizing. So everybody was in a panic mode. There were no customers willing to engage, speak. And I just landed up in freezing New York, trying to settle down, Virginia, very limited friends, new environment. Although I'd been going to US for many years, but nothing like, camping there, trying to settle down and trying to meet your quotas in a very, very challenging environment. And I quickly realized that there would possibly be 2 to 3 lakh tech salespeople in US, right? So I was just one of the many people, and it was becoming very hard to get traction. So I don't know how many of you remember Yellow Pages.
Of course.
We used to get these books earlier with printed, numbers. There was no, LinkedIn. LinkedIn wasn't at least big. If it was there, there was no Zoom info. So we would sit in office call rooms and pick up Yellow Pages and make calls. Mm-hmm. The whole day used to be constantly it used to be like a bad dream where phones are being slammed on you and nobody is responding to your emails and nobody is responding to phone calls. And every Friday call with my boss used to be like, what are you doing? How come you're not getting any meetings? And what's happening? And do you really think this is the right career for you? So I actually, introspected and dug deep into what I had been trained as, which is a professional marketer. And, nobody was talking about professional branding and social selling those days. And I said, rather than just doing reach outs, why don't I start sending out a newsletter? And I was in healthcare sales that time on the healthcare news you have not heard about. Started sending it out to prospects and I started getting a lot of traction. So people reaching out, and all I used to say is, hey, because I work across companies and I meet so many customers because I'm a salesperson, I know a lot of interesting things which I can tell you. And people started reaching out, connecting, and offering me a cup of coffee. And I was amazed. Like, here I am, first time in US, a nobody, And, very senior CXOs are reaching out and offering me a cup of coffee and giving me meetings. And I think that was my very small entry into the world of creating a personal brand. And I think I just lugged into it out of a crisis where I was not meeting my goals and I was a disaster of a salesperson.
That's really interesting as well, Apurva. So it's, you used your marketing chops to integrate that with the role that you had to just add value to possible customers. And that started working.
Yes, absolutely.
Very interesting. All right, great. So I really love the chatter on the chat box. We've crossed 300 people now, so that's fantastic. I would love people to keep sending in questions over here. I think one of the norms that we try and follow in anything that we do at Frogideas is that we don't try and self-promote ourselves. So I think if there is anything, like Apurva said, you can add value to the community, that'll be fantastic. You can send your opinions, your questions, and it'll help the community. And I think that goes back into building your professional brand as well. So please feel free to send out questions. I've already started seeing some questions coming in the chat box, and love the energy there. Okay, so I think, Virginia, you're also doing a doctorate now in B2B and at the Indian School of Business. And I know that in a way it's like you're almost going to become like an academic, but in the corporate world. So I think some of the questions around planning and thought process should probably flow to you. And my question to you is that, how do you, so Hari says that he didn't plan anything. It just sort of happened to him. Apurva didn't necessarily plan anything. He just wanted to add value. If you had to suggest how somebody should go about building a brand, can they plan this at all? And if so, how can they plan it?
Yeah, actually, there's two steps of it. I think most of us fumble into our first brand, right? I mean, that's usually how it happens. But I really think that at a certain point of your career, you need to be a little more planned and a little more curated about the brand you want to be. So let me give you a couple of tools. Number one, before you start thinking about brand, is you have to figure out the brand that you've already built that already exists, right? And so, that's where self-awareness starts. And so a couple of quick and easy ways to audit your brand today as it stands is, number one, go to Google and type in your name. And it's amazing to me the number of people that don't type in their name into Google to see what photographs are out there, what are the top 10 posts, what are the videos out there. There's some photograph from, some party 10 years ago. And so the first thing you got to do is you got to really kind of look at, when people search for you, which is Google is typically the first place, is everything the first and second page of Google what you want it to be? Are these the right videos, the right links, the right articles, right? You would do that for a business brand as well, right? To keep that. The second thing is within Google, as you type in your name, there's a bunch of related searches that come up, okay? There's maybe 5 or 6 keywords. Now, these are the most common keywords that people type alongside your name. Now, I apologize if you have a common name and therefore, the words are, there's a lot of, people with your name, but the more specific you get, if you type in Virginia Sharma LinkedIn, you'll start seeing like more specifics. And that's really important because you have to make a decision whether those related searches are what you want to be associated with. So let me give you an example. I always joke about this. It's kind of serious and important for the women on the phone and the men, because as we've discovered, Apurva suffers from the same issue, is that when you type in Virginia Sharma, for almost a decade, the number one search was Virginia Sharma age, and the number 2 search was Virginia Sharma husband, right? Now, I've done a lot of things in my career. I have a lot of interesting experiences and opinions and videos, but I realized that as people were searching my name, those are the 2 most interesting things. So I challenge any and all of you to find my age or my husband's picture on the internet, because you won't find it, right? Because that's my choice. That's the control that I have on my brand, is that I decide and you get to decide what you want to have out there. But to do that, you have to first know A, what's already out there, and B, what people want to know about. Now, if you want to know what I think about marketing and technology and women in leadership and inclusion, you will find all of that, right? But you won't find, you know, the clickbait that you care about. The second tool that's really, really important for those of you who are active on LinkedIn is a tip that I got from Hari Krishnan, who's the ex-MD of LinkedIn, who gave me a great tip. There's a section called skills and endorsements, okay? And many of us don't look at that section as a personal brand audit. Usually you get invited to endorse somebody else. Now, what's important about that is somewhere in your career, when you cross about 50 endorsements for something, that is statistically a decent sample size of what people think you are known for, what your brand is in the professional arena. Okay, so, you know, for us academic researcher types, the numbers have to be up above a certain point for it to matter. And so then what you got to decide is, if you're making a career shift like I did from marketing to sales, are the top 3 skills that are coming up, are those the things you want to be known for? So for example, for me, my top 3 skills were all in marketing. And I had been a manager and an executive for several years, and I wanted to move to general management and sales. So when I looked, leadership and management was below analytics for me, which is not where I wanted it to be. So you have to first know, A, what is your brand on Google? Secondly, what is your brand on LinkedIn? And then we'll talk a little bit later about what are the techniques to pivot your brand or change your brand once it's already established. But just know that every single person on this call right now already has a starting point baseline brand. And so before you do anything else, you have to first do that audit.
Interesting. So, but it's interesting that you said that, you know, you don't allow a lot of your personal life to come out online. And Apurva, my question is, you know, to you, even I struggle with this a lot. You know, there is a part of my life where I teach yoga and meditation, but I've always been hesitant to talk about it, especially on LinkedIn, because I'm always fearful that I'll get perceived in a certain way. Like in my office, I don't talk too much about it with my team as well, because, you know, I'm fearful that they'll start thinking of me as that old dude who wants to teach everybody meditation, you know. So, so how much of you should really come out when you're building your brand? What is,
I mean, yeah, I think the others have a point of view on this as well. So I'd ask them to go first, but I think to be clear, my starting point before all this, you know, professional stuff came out was a lot of my personal thoughts coming out, right? So I think it's a choice to say, I want people to know that I have this amazing mom who, you know, doesn't speak a lot of English and whose context has always been so different than mine. And I share, you know, conversations she's having with her sister about arranged marriage. Like, that's pretty personal, right? And that's a deep part of my identity, right? And it's an identity I'm very, very much connected to. But I think for the safety of your loved ones, like, I don't think it's really fair that if you want to protect the identity of your significant other, your family, your children, it's not necessary to, unless you have their consent, by the way, because even your family should opt into being part of your brand. You know, they have their own world and their own identity, and they may not want to be on, you know, LinkedIn or otherwise. So I think out of respect for them, I think the other thing about age is the fact that I don't think that that's very much of a relevant credential in today's world. I don't think whether you are a man or a woman or 30 or 20 or 40 should matter. So some of it is, you know, I'm a professional. I have thoughts, opinions, expertise, and I'm, you know, I'm not a celebrity. So it really doesn't matter who I'm married to or how old I am, right? So, yeah, and that's the difference. Being a professional brand doesn't make you a celebrity, and nor should you want to strive for that, because that's not necessarily a life that they opt for either.
But even to opine, maybe my next, Apurva, I'll just come back to you in a minute about this. You know, even to opine something, Hari, I suppose this question should go to you. You know, you mentioned that you're a shy person by nature, and I can relate with that. You know, even I find myself always little bit hesitant to share things, not all the time confident that should I be sharing this? Should I be speaking with these people? I'm a shy networker. It's very difficult for me to go to events. And there are so many people already in the chat. We're seeing people write that, I'm really shy. What should I do? So how should a shy person, a self-effacing person, go about building a brand for themselves?
It was nice listening to Virginia in terms of a very structured approach on how to build a brand. I never knew any of this. So these are all deep insights for me. My approach has been very, very instinctive and from the heart. So I have always tried to be authentic, tried to share whatever I felt was important, whatever I liked to do. I did whatever I liked to do in a very authentic manner, offline as well as online. And that's the way I think my brand got built out. So I think in the past, for instance, I never really loved going and meeting, people from different walks of life, attending conferences. But gradually, I think in school itself, I figured out what were some of my strengths. I've always been a very self-aware individual. I was a great communicator, both written as well as, spoken. So I was always raising my hand for speaking in debates like Apurva was. And although I was nervous, every time I spoke in front of a group of audience, I always volunteered and wanted to speak. I wanted to share what I thought about every topic. And I think that's the same way it's played out online as well. And my personality has evolved very rapidly in the last few years. I think I would have been very reluctant to share many things, but I realized that just be authentic. Don't care too much about or worry about what you should share, what you shouldn't share. I made a nice post when my daughter went to college, I thought that was a post that every parent would love to have. From a very short one, which is about the day she was born to the day she flew out of the nest, it was a post from the heart. So I think I have always followed this approach, which is whatever interests me, talk about it in a very, very genuine way. Don't be very critical unnecessarily. Don't get into arguments. Share your points of view. Respect other people's points of view. And I think authenticity is what really matters. And I have always played by this, which is be authentic, be genuine, don't hesitate to share stuff. It could be, I never knew a lot about diversity, for example. Diversity and inclusion is something that I've begun to experience in a very, very personal way at workplace and elsewhere. And in the process, I talked to a lot of interesting people and I've begun to write articles on this. For example, Mint carried a couple of articles of mine. I've never hesitated to share my learnings from new things that I'm personally experiencing. And my approach has been share something which is very insightful, even on topics that hundreds and thousands of people may be writing and speaking about. Say something that no one else has said before. Find something that no one else has been able to find before. So I think sharing insights comes to me very naturally. So I think the point about being, shy, reticent, I think is all okay. I've also realized that, shy people, reticent people, introverts can build some of the most powerful, deep networks that can become very useful and become very valuable over a point of time. It's a misconception that people who are extroverts only can build networks. I think that's been my biggest lesson in the last few years.
That's fantastic. I think this also answers one of the questions that came in the chat, that how do you get over an imposter syndrome while sharing things online? Be authentic, be yourself, and talk about things that really matter to you. But what matters to you can be so varied and so vast. And Apurva, maybe I should bring you in on this question, that how much of you should really come out when you're trying to build a brand? Because there are so many facets of you, your personality, your life. Is there a limit? How do you think about these things?
That's a very, very good question, Jatin. And I don't claim to be a subject matter expert on that, but I'll just share how I think about it. So I think all of us, some of us are really interested in many things. Like for me, I'm interested in movies, I'm interested in traveling, I'm interested in photography, I'm interested in writing, I'm interested in tech, I'm interested in spiritualism, in music. So you're making a very valid point. And I think as the world has become more digital, it becomes so easy for all of us to at least get some rudimentary appreciation of stimuli available. So there are many of us who are interested in many things, but I think the first point is not to confuse interest with expertise. Mm-hmm. So I love listening to music, but I'm not a musician by any. So when you're thinking about brands, personal brand, and we will talk later about why do I put it a personal brand and not a professional brand. As a personal brand, I would say always be very careful about not confusing your source of value with what interests you. And I would go back to the famous Ikigai book, which basically says, think of your life as 3 Venn diagrams. What do you really enjoy doing? Does the world see value in, and they are willing to pay for it? So these are the 3 circles. And think of it like a Venn diagram. And at the center of the Venn diagram is your brand ethos, your personal brand value. And that's what you should consistently portray. Yes, occasionally you can bring out other tertiary attributes of the brand. But I think it's very, very important to reinforce, be consistent with 1 or 2 things and build your brand around that.
Interesting. There's still a lot of gnawing questions in my head about this thing that you shared, Apurva. So maybe I should ask one of them to Virginia. Virginia, do you think it's, I know that you're really passionate about women in leadership, and you've been speaking about that a lot. Do you think it's different at all for women from what Apurva?
Yeah, I mean, look, a couple of things. I've never really spoken at large women conferences. Interesting. I don't have a problem with public speaking. I'm a trained extrovert. At a young age, I was put through the rigor of getting on stage, even when I didn't want to. That's what ambitious parents do. They put you on stage to get rid of your stage fright when you're like 8. But I actually had a problem with kind of conferences and networking events for women because I don't think they were very inclusive to begin with. And I know that that's controversial, but the same 100 women speak to the same 100 women and they take care of the same 100 women. And I don't think that that's the intention. So I think part of my reason for speaking about women in leadership more on social media is I think it's a lot more inclusive. Now, to answer your question about where it's different for women, yes, I think women and introverts probably have something in common, which is, I think that we have more, there's the professional brand, there's the personal brand, and there's a family brand. And I think actually we have that third dimension, right? We have people at home, some of us that are new in marriages, new in relationships, part of a social ecosystem where that big, ambitious, extroverted, confident brand that is out there on stage or in the professional world isn't always the brand or the identity that we want at home, because it could actually ruffle some feathers. That's just the reality of, women, Indian women specifically. And quite frankly, harmony is very, very important to all of us. And so sometimes you have to make choices to say, you know what, that picture of me on stage is not gonna be something I put out on my Facebook because, my aunts and uncles and everybody are over there, or, especially, and let's have an honest conversation over the next few weeks, months, years, you're going to see people in family units potentially have economic challenges, lose their jobs. And if you're doing okay and your significant other is not, sometimes that creates a relationship challenge, which happened, by the way, during the recession. There were a lot of challenges during the recession during this time. So people, I think women have to be cognizant about how much of all of them comes out in their brand for the sake of their family. Now, do I like it? I don't, but that's the reality, and it's better to face it. I think that's I wanted to answer this question around like what Hari brought up with introverts as well. Sometimes there's safety in numbers, and this is true for women as well. If you're not confident writing a post, writing an opinion openly as a standalone, leave a comment on somebody else's post, share somebody else's article, right? Like somebody else's article. Like, part of being in service of your network is not always to be the one with the most important or the most informed opinion. Be of service by sharing something that is valuable to you, right? And I think that's one of the things that people assume about professional branding, is that it's not the people that know the most about something that become a professional brand. Those are experts, right? The people that become professional brands are ones that are the most useful to their network in the areas that they're known for. So for me, it's, you know, marketing, and it's technology, and it's women in leadership. People who follow me start getting used to the fact that I will probably be reading a lot about that and share what I think is important. If you're an introvert, don't worry about it. Like a post, leave a small comment. If there's 800 other comments, you're safe in numbers, right? So I would say that start small, start in the safety of numbers.
Wow. I actually never imagined that these kind of dynamics are something that, you know, women need to go through. And thank you for sharing that, Virginia. It's an eye opener for me as well. Thank you. Apurva, you know, how do you overcome this challenge? A lot of people have been writing in and they're saying, you know, we feel very shy to click on post. Whenever we are trying to publish on LinkedIn, we write something, but we feel shy thereafter because we're not sure if anybody really cares about our opinion, if anybody wants to engage with us. Why should our opinion matter to people? So it's, you know, for people who are phenomenal products, like you're from Harvard Business School, you know, there's so many professional accomplishments that all three of you have, which make you natural authorities in a lot of things. How do people overcome this fear in case they might not have that kind of professional equity, and get over that fear? How can they? What are your suggestions on that?
So I think you know, getting over fear is not only about personal brand. I think it's a life skill. So I'll give you a slightly disconnected but hopefully connected answer. So the way I look at fear is all of us are fearful of something. So even if you think you are Khatron ke Khiladi or whatever they call it in Bollywood, I think deep down, it could be anything. It could be fear of failure. It could be fear of not being accepted. It could be fear of being ridiculed. Or as a child, it could be just fear of, you know, getting bullied in school. So I think the life skill I would recommend is whatever you're fearful about, write it down and think about what is the worst that can happen if that happens. And once you've imagined the worst and you've accepted this is the worst that can happen, you'll be fine with it, largely. There could be, you know, special circumstances where that doesn't work. But by and large, I have seen when I've been coaching people or even with myself or with my family, I think this really works very well. Because what is the worst that can happen? If you post something, you could get trolled. So what? Ultimately, your life is back home with your family, with your near ones, your loved ones. And there's nothing which can take away from that. So you have to find your source of strength, and everything else is noise. It pretty much doesn't matter. And you always have to redirect that fear into a constructive, positive force and draw strength from your near and dear ones and what you hold dear. So I think that really helps.
I think Jatin's on mute.
I think Jatin is going to come online and now tell us his fear is he forgot the unmute button.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, I wanted to speak something out and I couldn't unmute myself, you know, so maybe, you know, so that's good life advice, but, you know, I still want to press on this a little bit more. Maybe I can bring Hari in on this because this is a real challenge, you know, and even I feel that way personally. A lot of people have been asking this in the chat section. Is that how do you overcome this challenge of, you know, kind of sort of blowing your own trumpet versus just communicating enough? Is there a balance to that? How do you think about this entire dynamic?
The way I see it, again, I go back to my, you know, basic philosophy of just be authentic, you know, and don't blow your trumpet. I think deep in your heart, you know, you always know whether you're trying to blow your trumpet or whether you're trying to be authentic. I think contributing on someone else's post with a comment that you genuinely feel is something that you should begin to do if you're shy. Instead of posting on your own, you could start engaging on other people's comments. But I would say don't ever blow your trumpet. Know it in your heart, you're not blowing your trumpet. And then just be authentic about it. And going back to what Apurva said, you need to overcome some small fears in life. And that's not just about activity on social media, but it's about, activities in life, offline life as well. So I think practice, make a small beginning, get your early wins. I think there's no better way of overcoming fear than getting positive endorsement for some of the things that you're doing. So if your comment, for example, is appreciated by someone else comments on your comment, I think there can be no bigger morale booster than that. So I would say just be authentic. Don't hesitate to share your thoughts. Be very genuine. Don't be rude. Try and understand the other person's point of view. Don't take extreme positions. Use language that is collaborative. Don't use language that can break relationships or invite trolling. Even if people troll you, I think, first of all, if you manage your language well, half the problem or 90% of the problem is not with what you're saying, but with the way you're saying, the words you're choosing. So if you're very careful about the words you choose, very unlikely you get trolled. Even in the remote instance of you're getting trolled, handle that with dignity. Don't reverse troll. Go back and deal with the substantial point that the critique is making. Critics, they can't sometimes control the language, but they are saying something genuine and they're making a good point. Just understand what's the good point that they are making. Acknowledge that. I think that will kill most of the trolls. So I think there is no substitute to being authentic. Be genuine. Genuinely do not try and blow your trumpet. Do not try to do things for the sake of influencing important people. Don't do things for the sake of getting jobs or doing other motives. Your motive should be honest. So I think with all of these things, you will overcome your fear slowly.
Just a follow-up question on that. I think Anamika has a great question. So once you get over this fear, organically keep building up confidence, start small, but how do you decide on what to speak about, what to write about?
Yeah. What is it that you feel strongly about, right? I think all of us have a good sense of what we understand and what we don't understand well. So I would say usually refrain from speaking on topics that you don't understand well, because then you are not seen as adding value, and begin to add value on topics that you understand well, where you have insights that will be valued by the community. So I think, I think Virginia also mentioned this right at the beginning, which is self-awareness is very critical, not just for brand building, but for success in life. You need to know who you are, what you're good at, what you're not good at. And therefore, share stuff that you're really good at, where people will respect you for your opinions.
I think just a point on that as well, and it's perfectly okay, I think, to build a brand around being a curious person, right? Authenticity is one thing, but curiosity also reflects an openness to other people's ideas, points of view. And I think one thing that makes, there's a lot of questions around, I'm early in my career, I don't have a lot of experiences to share. But one of the things that recruiters, hiring managers, leaders look at is what are the types of questions and things that you're interested in, right? So when I see people that have a curiosity about the question of diversity and inclusion or around global business, to me, that curiosity represents a point, that is also a statement that you're making to say, I don't know the answer. And I think, unfortunately, what's happened in the world is that everybody feels that they need to be the expert, top 5 trends of this, top 10 ways of doing this. What I'm most interested in seeing on my feed is people that ask a great question. That's what they teach us in academia, which is it's not the people that write the best papers, but it's the people that have the most interesting questions that actually have the most successful, most cited papers. And so the big thing is, can you ask a great question before you write a great post is probably a good rule of thumb. And then go on that journey of finding the answer through your network, through reading. And if you can't find the answer, ask your network. Asking for help is a beautiful thing. I love working with people that ask for help.
I just take a moment, Jatin. I think I'd like to build on this. I'm very passionate about curiosity as being a very important trait for happiness itself and success in general. So I think it's not just in online media, but also in real life. I think it's important to be curious. It's important to ask a lot of questions. And you can judge a person by the quality of questions that a person asks. Sometimes questions can get you to think about things that you never thought before. Questions can help you get to the root of an issue. Even if you don't understand an issue deeply, by asking the right kind of questions, you can help a group of experts to reach the right kind of answers. I think curiosity is a very important component in life itself. And I think in some ways it will begin to reflect on your online presence as well. Because online presence is just a shadow of your real self.
I think
I
that
just want to add on to what Hari was saying. I think while asking questions is a great habit. Before asking, don't ask to just interject, but ask to learn. And there is so much learning which is already online. So if you're asking a question, no pressure, but ideally it should be a high quality one.
okay. How much is consistency important? There's a question that came in from, I think that's a great question, because I think once we start figuring out what to speak about, which is with curiosity, which is trying to ask the right questions, trying to add value. And I also want to just mention here, like I like one thing that Virginia does really well. She shares articles of topics that really interest her. And she only, she would put her opinion about it as well on top of that. And it just really helps in putting things in context. So those can be great tips. But how much is consistency important? I think Apurva, Virginia, you guys are really, really consistent. I've seen that over the years. What are the things that you do to make sure that you're consistent? Is it the most important thing that you feel is there? Your views on that?
I would say, Jatin, a lot of people confuse being on social media as the only way to build a personal brand. Until unless you want to be a politician or a religious leader, or someone who's known to, 1 to 2 billion people, you can also build your personal brand on dark social. WhatsApp is a great example of dark social. Personal meetings with people who matter to you and whom you want to matter to is a great example. And you have to be consistent, but not necessarily consistent by only posting a lot of content. And I'm being a little provocative here. Any good discussion, the hallmark is a good provocation. So I think you have to clearly define where do you want to build your personal brand? What's your target audience? So if your target audience is 50 investors, even if you don't post regularly, it's fine. If your target audience is 200 CEOs in India and you want to reposition yourself, even if you don't post, it's fine, because there are better forums to engage with them, and you should attend those forums, be in touch with them. So consistency is important, but you have to decide what game are you playing and which field are you playing it on. At times, social is not the best, because what happens is if you're a C-level leader and there are certain people in India who are very, very regular, and they've been founders, CEOs, and who've just, I think, done a great disservice to their brand by posting every day, a couple of times a day, and now it's gone from being something valuable to just noise, white noise.
Yeah, I would just add that many of you, as you grow in your career, if you use consistency and not authenticity as a direction, you end up hiring an agency. Sorry, Jatin. Or you'll hire, a corp comms. You'll outsource that because you'll feel this pressure that, I need to post something today and I haven't done it. So let's find something to post. I mean, I can totally see after a while you build the muscle to look to see whether someone else is posting on somebody's behalf. So a couple of things about consistency. I don't think consistency is about timing. Consistency is about one very simple principle for me. If I met you in real life and I met you at an event, at a party, at my house, on the street, would I recognize you in person when I meet you and I read you, I follow you, I read you, and I meet you in person? Would you crack bad jokes like you do? Would you be provocative? Like Hari, I can now tell, if I meet him in person, he'll be the same person, right? I am provocative. I get into run-ins with people. I've had one troll and then he ran away, but I have had a troll. And that is who I am, because I feel very passionately about certain things. But I'm also that in my real life, right? So I think the idea is the consistency there is people should not have a dissonance in hearing your tone and your voice online and meeting you in person saying, I don't recognize this person, right? Same thing about your photograph. Like, you know, I have blemishes, like, you know, I look the way I do here as I do in real life. I don't look a different way. So I think it's really important that the consistency comes in tone, in personality, in values, and that comes out in the way you write. So if you end up focusing on, I need to post something every day, you run the risk of actually outsourcing it and then losing everything you've built anyway.
Yeah, so consistency has to be coupled with authenticity. I think that's the message. It cannot be one or the other. It has to be authentic yet consistent, and consistent yet authentic. So fair message. I think agencies can do that sometimes, Virginia. So
I know, I was being provocative.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So,
well left, Jatin.
All right, so I think I'll end with the last question now, and then what we'll do is we'll open up the floor for some questions. I think for the audience, my request is to start thinking of questions with only one very big qualifier and filter in mind. Is your question going to help at least 10 more people? And if that's the case, then we would love to have you ask the question. So you can raise your hand on the right side. You can see the raise hand button, and we'll get you to ask a question. We'll only take a few questions because we won't have too much time, and then we'll end with something interesting, which I'll come to later. So my last question to all three of you, but maybe would appreciate quicker answers on this because we are running short. How do you know that you're on the right track, that you're succeeding, that you're doing a good job? How do you, is there a feedback mechanism that you can serve yourself to understand that I am on the right track? This is a question that I struggle with a lot. I'm not sure if I'm on the right track, if I'm doing this right. Then there is incidental success, or, so then you're always kind of confused what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. So how do you guys navigate that kind of a paradigm? Anyone can go first, whoever feels the strongest.
I mean, I'll give a very tactical answer, and I'll give it out of my personal experience. About 4 or 5 years ago, when I wanted to, as I mentioned earlier, pivot to sales and general management, when I looked at the skills and endorsement, leadership for me was 56 endorsements, right? Like I mentioned below, analytics. And today it's like 70 something, right? And a lot of it is because over the last few years, I've become more confident about going outside my technical domain, which is digital marketing, and start sharing more about leadership topics. It's not that I didn't have opinions around leadership earlier. It's that I was not conscious and not organized about my professional brand and saying, hey, I really want to be known as a good leader in industry, and so therefore I should share or ask more questions about this. So I think the number one thing to see if you're on the right track is whether you're making a difference on that metric. And then the second thing, honestly, is, take a look at your recruiter outreaches. So when recruiters reach out to you and they're predominantly in a specific field, for example, in the past, it's always been marketing. There was a moment a couple of years ago where people started reaching out to me for non-marketing jobs. And I'm like, okay, now this works, right? So if people who don't know anything about me are just following me, are now pivoting and looking at me for jobs outside marketing, then I'm actually, on track, both internally and externally, by the way, not just in your current role, in your current organization as well, externally.
All right. So maybe, John, let me share my thoughts on this. So I'll just go back to an analogy that entrepreneurs can relate to. There's something called a product market fit concept, when you launch a product. And how do you recognize that the product market fit is good? Just because a few customers tell you that your product is cool does not mean you have a great product market fit. I think you can sense a product market fit if people want to meet you. You were reaching out to meet them, and now they come and say, can we expedite this meeting? Can we do this meeting sooner than later? When people line up outside and say, can we do a product launch early? Can you introduce this new feature, even using it? When your net promoter score is high, when people are the word of mouth for a product is high. I think the same thing applies in your personal brand as well. Where I completely am in disagreement with Virginia is that I won't consider a recruiter reaching out to you as a success metric at all. I think if recruiters figure out who are the people who are looking for jobs and who care about looking for jobs, I think my way of success is if people reach out to you for help. If people, reach out to you saying that, I'm struggling with this, this thing, can you come and help me with this? And from the kind of requests that come to you, you know that they're authentic. You know that there is a great product market fit in terms of your skills and the problem that they are trying to address. When a struggling entrepreneur comes and tells you, you know what, can you post this on my behalf a little bit? Can you cheerlead for me? This is where I'm stuck. Can you help me get a few leads? And the entrepreneur is struggling, doing a great job solving a difficult problem, and is yet coming to you for cheerleading. I think that's a great measure of success. If a student comes and reaches out to you and says, you know what, I want to make some career choices. This is what I want to do. Can I talk to you? You can make out if authentic or not. I think if you are able to help the communities that around you, the communities that you are interested in, I think it's a great measure of success. And I think you can very easily see this. Nobody has to ever tell you this.
That's a great point. Before you start, Apurva, I just wanted to qualify one more thing, that Hari said. I think it's a phenomenal point. Vikas had just asked that, what is the right medium to build your brand? Is it LinkedIn? Is it medium.com? Is it YouTube or something else? I think what Hari says and what Virginia says is first, this brand is not something which is online versus offline. It extends to the entire facet of your personality. It is internal focus towards your organization as well. And then only then can it become external focused. And the mediums really, because, it can be anything today. You can do podcasts, you can do videos, you can do LinkedIn posts, you can write LinkedIn articles, you can write blog posts. You can do anything provided you have authenticity and consistency, as far as I have gleaned from all the things that the panelists have shared. Apurva, your thoughts on, what constitutes a success? How should one understand that you're on the right track?
I'll narrate a small quote from one of my favorite books, Alice in Wonderland. So what happens is Alice asks, would you tell me please which way I ought to go from here? And the cat says, that depends a great deal on where you want to go. Alice says, I don't care much where. The cat replies back by saying, then it pretty much doesn't matter which way you go, so long as you get somewhere. And then the cat replies, you will only get somewhere if you walk long enough. And it's a very deep point which Lewis Carroll is making. What he basically says is, if you don't have a goal in life or a goal for your personal brand, it doesn't matter where you get to. You'll get somewhere, but it doesn't matter where you get to. Very important for everybody trying to build their personal brands to have micro goals. And I would say micro goals versus a 5-year, 10-year goal, because you need to be very fluid. We are living in a very, very dynamic world. And a micro goal could be as small as, I'm trying to raise money for my venture, and I want 10 out of the 50 VCs I write to accept my LinkedIn invite. And out of the 10, I want at least 5 to get on a call with me to hear my pitch. And the second thing which Lewis Carroll says is, you will get to a place where you want to if you stay long enough at it. So I think most of us forget that if you really want to build an enduring brand, think of it as a 40, 50, 60-year journey. Think of it as the way Ratan Tata has behaved over many years of public life, or many other noteworthy people. There is no need to rush. If you feel you're not making a lot of movement, it could just be that success is around the corner and you need to be at it and not give up. And try to build an enduring, sustainable brand. I think Virginia started off, or I think you, Jatin, quoted Jeff Bezos, who basically said that, your personal brand is what people talk about you when you're not in the room. And I would take it a extent further. I would say if you want to build an enduring personal brand, it's going to be what people talk about you when you're no more on earth. So there's a very famous Jim Morrison song. It's called The Movie. And Jim Morrison in the movie says, did you lead a life good enough to make a movie on? So have epic dreams and play for the long term.
Fantastic, Apurva. That's a wonderful, note on which we should open up the floor. I think, if you have any questions that you think are going to help at least 5 or 10 other people as well, please raise your hand on Zoom and I'll call upon you to ask that question in person. We'll only take a couple of questions and then we move on to. So on Zoom, Anish, you've asked how to raise your hand. So on the right side on Zoom, you can see this icon which says raise hand in blue. So you can just click on that in case you have a question which you think is very pertinent. So I've got one question from Vivek. Vivek Dubey, you raise your hand. So you can just unmute yourself and ask the question, Vivek. Maybe you can introduce yourself very quickly and then you can ask the question. I lost Vivek. So people are raising their hands and then taking it out. So does anybody want to ask a question in person?
There's some really good questions in the feed, Jatin.
Yeah, there are, but I still want to get somebody the opportunity.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Vivek.
Okay, yeah. So, all the panelists have made a very valid points and the direction towards making a personal brand. So whenever we make personal brand, first of all, we need to set and see that where are we standing currently. What are the parameters that are there to first of all evaluate where are we and how to set goals for the future. Maybe it's time bound or not. As of now, I'm not sure. But should it be like that, or is just like that? Just the direction matters.
Does anybody want to take that on?
So if I understand the question, and maybe you guys can actually help me to just understand the question, which is, once you figure out where your brand is, should you have specific goals or should you have more broader guidance or direction? Would you say that's the question? Is that the correct question?
Is it? Because I'm not quite sure. I lost the train. I'm not very sure of. I'm not very clear on the question myself.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like whenever we are, planning to build a brand, so we always evaluate first of all where our brand stand in general. So same follows for personal brand as well. So what are those parameters that we evaluate ourselves? Say that, okay, my personal brand stands here and this should be my path, or should say the goal track to reach at a level.
Can I take this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the way I would see this, Vivek, is that, what is brand ultimately? Personal brand is about who you are as an individual. And I think largely who you are as an individual should determine the kind of brand you would want to build. I think you can always build in some aspirational component, but it should be largely around who you are. And of course, all of us want to make some changes. All of us want to, overcome some defects that we personally have. And therefore, it should have that component of aspiration. In terms of whether the aspirational component and even the brand building should have timelines or not, I'm not really sure. That's not an approach that I have ever followed. I have just tried to lead a very happy life, do things that I love doing always. And sometimes I love fixing some flaws in myself. And that has taken me in a certain direction and therefore helped me go towards some goals but I've never laid out goals. I've never ever had timelines. That's my
So I'll give you a little technique that I think helps you on your brand audit. I gave you some of the digital tools earlier, but a very simple one to build on what Hari said is take 10 people in your life that know you best, right? Your best friend, your family members, your coworkers, your boss, whatever. And basically make them write down or share with you, what they think your brand is. Like, what is the top 3 things that they think about you, right? So that's basically your quick and dirty audit. You're funny, you're interesting, you're, analytical. I don't know, some mix of that. And it needs to be a mix of personal and professional. Then show people who don't really know you, maybe acquaintances, have them go through your LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or feed from the last 1 week and have them read what you write. Okay, 1 week, 2 weeks. And basically ask them, given what they've read about you, what do they think about you? And if there's a dissonance between that and the way you're showing up on social, you've got some work to do, right? So if you're funny in real life and you're analytical in real life and the last 2 weeks of posts are like serious, boring, and like esoteric, you're off, right? You're not yourself. And so that's a quick and dirty way to kind of integrate the two. And your goals are very simple. You want these to be one, right? I said it earlier, which is when I meet you in person, I want to know that I wasn't duped, right? I want to know that the person that I read about and followed is the same person I'm meeting in real life.
You know, what I really love about this panel is the diversity of opinion and perspective, you know. So we've got Hari is an introvert. Virginia, you're certainly an extrovert. You said you're a trained extrovert. I found that word extremely interesting. I love how, Virginia has a really planned approach. I think Apurva has a really inspirational approach, and Hari has a really, I would say authentic, just purely hard. You know, I love all these different perspectives coming. It's very beautiful to witness this. One more question we'll take from Shuchin. Shuchin Bajaj is the founder director of Ujala Cygnus Hospitals, runs about 12 or 15 low-cost healthcare hospitals across Haryana and Punjab. Welcome, Shuchin. Maybe you can ask your question now.
Hi, thank you very much, Jatin. Brilliant panel, and thank you, everyone. It's been really inspiring, and as you said, the diversity is truly brilliant. I just wanted a follow-up on what Virginia just said and what you said in the beginning, Jatin, as well, that you are very interested in yoga, but you don't really know whether to put it out there because people may not then take you too seriously in your own role. I think a lot of us have this same problem. I have the same problem. I would rather, do jokes all the time and funny videos, but I'm afraid that, it will really affect the thing that I'm really passionate about. I'm passionate about building low-cost healthcare and providing access to healthcare to everybody. If you are seen as a really funny person, like Apurva also said, if you put too many things out there, you just become a white noise. So have you got any getaway, Jatin, that will you now focus on yoga after you go away from this panel or not? I haven't actually. I don't really know whether I should do funny videos or I should just keep talking seriously about healthcare and lack of access. But if you meet me in person, you have met me many times. I'm not really that person, right? I have to have a funny angle to almost everything. So what do you do?
I think, Shuchin, I definitely take away from the panel, and I think I loved what Hari said. I think what he said was that if you really feel from your heart about something, that should come out in what you're speaking about. And I do feel a lot about yoga and meditation. To be very honest, I've been very scared about it to share it because sometimes I'm worried. Hey, people will start thinking I'm some sort of a right-wing fanatic. Some people will start thinking I'm a old school, like a Baba Ramdev kind of a fellow. So all these kind of thoughts, they cloud me, and I've not shared things as actively as I would like to. And like in Stanford, I've been teaching people meditation and yoga, but I think certainly the one takeaway that I take away is that I will be posting that stuff now, and I will be publishing stuff on yoga and meditation, but I will probably try and integrate it with business, try and integrate it with marketing, try and integrate it with, what can help people rather than, so does that help? I don't know, Shuchin, how you're going to share your jokes though, because when you start sharing your jokes on WhatsApp with us, I'm not sure how many of them can come on LinkedIn. All right, so thanks, Shuchin. So we'll take one last question. Let's see who we've got. Rajan Agarwal, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. So can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Rajan.
Yeah. So I was saying, basically this self-branding or branding thing is esoteric thing, right? Esoteric in nature. So when you say branding, basically it is perception in the mind of, people, right? So when you go inside and introspect, like what exactly you have to do, so you can do self-branding. So is there any particular roadmap to understand, to, get the point upon which you can write about.
So, Rajan, I am not very clear if I understand the question very well. Maybe, does anybody from the panel understand the question? I'm a little unclear.
I think it's that, let me try to interpret, which is, what do I write about? If I, is that the question, which is like, okay, this is who I am. I know who I am. Now, what do I write about? Is that the question?
Right. You got it.
Yeah. So I think, Jatin, you brought up a really good point. And it's a really good technique to say, what am I passionate about? This is the Ikigai point that Apurva brought up. I think some of the best writers integrate a passion that they have, like football or their children or art or music or yoga or the world, whatever, sustainability, diversity, and they take their profession, right? And do you have the ability, and a really good technique that I use is, before you write anything, write the headline of your blog post, like write the subject, like what is that title of your post, right? That's going to integrate your worlds, right? Like what soccer taught me about leadership. I don't know. I just made that up. That's not a good one. It's very common. But I think your ability to integrate your passion with something else is always a very powerful way to start. What you'll find there is that you will write more beautifully when you actually have something that you care about a lot, right? So if you care about healthcare, you know that's going to be your topic. It's going to be about, Sachin, you said you really care about healthcare, but you're a funny guy. So maybe the tonality is funny, but you actually write about healthcare. Maybe you start with a Dilbert cartoon, right? Like there's ways to integrate those two. So I would say, tone, content, and format, whether you use video, whether you use long form. I'm not very good with video. I like writing long form. I like writing sentences. So, but if you prefer video, fine. So just kind of organize yourself that way. What's my headline? What's my content? What's my tone? What's my format?
Great. Thanks for that. I think we're getting a lot of other questions on the chat, and a lot of people are writing to me personally as well. Unfortunately, we can't answer all the questions today. I think the idea today is to raise curiosity amongst all of you so that you can start on this journey. And if you're well in your journey, start ironing out some of the nooks and crannies that you might be facing. One thing that we love to end our webinars with is takeaways. So what I would love to now open up in the next 7 or 8 minutes is 2 or 3 people sharing their top 2 or 3 takeaways from the session. I shared mine. And if anybody would like to share that, please do raise your hand. We'll call upon you.
Jatin, can we also ask them to write it for the introverts in case they don't want to speak up?
You can write it down on the chat group so that all of us can learn. And if you would like to share it with the entire group, unfortunately, I'm not sure how to call upon you now because there are a lot of hands which are raised. So why don't I just open it up? If there are 2 or 3 takeaways that you feel really passionate about, just unmute yourself and start sharing it with us. But please, my request is please be brief because we are very short on time.
Hi, Noble here.
Yes, go ahead, Noble.
Yeah, I think key takeaways for me is, I think, like Hari said, being authentic. I think stick to what you're passionate about and talk about stuff which you're really good at, right? And be curious. These are the few things which will be key takeaways for me.
Hi, Nancy here.
Hi, Nancy, please go
Yeah.
ahead.
Thank you for the session. And my takeaways would be from all of you, like, the diversity of panel was so great that I can also feel that on myself. So I will be taking care that I try to be authentic. I try to focus on what I really feel about. And if I don't have it, commonly I don't have a post to write about, I stick to liking, commenting, and sharing my thoughts. So that would be my takeaway. And I was always thinking maybe I'm not doing enough, but after this session I think it's okay. I mean, it's okay if I cannot write an article. It's okay to agree or disagree with others and follow on that. Thank you.
Hi, Udit here. my takeaway is actually not to be fearful and imagine the worst to be there, and at last that we have our loved and near ones to go back to. And that was a very thoughtful tip, Apurva. I think that brings out the best in us, and actually go out there and experiment. This is a short life. Thank you.
Thank
Hi,
you.
this is Bhavna here. And first of all, it was a fabulous session. Great to see Hari and Apurva and Virginia here. I think my biggest takeaway was curiosity. Because if you don't have curiosity, you will not venture out. And also the thing is to find your niche in digital. Not everybody is good at everything. To find your niche.
Hi, this side Paramjot.
Hi, Paramjot.
Hi. So the key takeaway which I got from the session is first from Virginia, that is being self-aware, and the right technique was said by her, that reach out to the people, like 10 people who are brutally honest with you, and then you can figure out where you need to work. Then being authentic from Hari, and being curious. That was the key takeaways from the session. Thank you so much.
Hello. Hi, this is Amit here.
Hi.
Hi. So I took up, apart from all of the points that everyone said, I quite like 2 points. One is about self-audit, I think very rightly said. And the second is about using dark social, right? Because I've seen a lot of times WhatsApp kind of works brilliantly for me rather than going on to LinkedIn and other things.
Hi, Jatin.
Can we hear some women as well? Because I feel that somehow they've been underserved in this group, and I'm scared of Virginia's next post.
Can I say something?
I was there. Nancy was there.
Yes. Yeah. So please.
Yeah. Hi to everyone. Just wanted to say, I think my key takeaway is when you don't make a conscious effort to create a brand, just let it be organic. Just let it be authentic, as you all are saying, rightly so. I think rather than thinking you're creating a personal brand, just go for it. It'll happen. That's what I feel that it was the biggest thing which I learned. And I actually try to follow it as well. So, yeah.
I'm Ashwini Gupta. I visualize the physical takeaway. I have got a lot of ideas. If I can be given a recording of the program, it would be even better.
Sure. You will. I'll just like to.
My biggest takeaway is asking the right
I believe
question.
one good point which
And I
Hari
think that's what
mentioned.
I'm going through.
I think it's too many people saying.
Thank you, everybody.
Put everyone on mute, because I'm sorry, I'll have to cut this, over here, because it's getting a little bit chaotic. But thank you, everybody. I think these were great takeaways. I think overall, just by the quality of questioning, by the quality of takeaways, and the quality of perspectives that came out from all the panelists, I would be patting myself on the back and self-congratulating all of us into saying that this was a successful panel. And I think it'll create the right curiosity for everyone to go ahead with their journeys, to create strong brands, and help the world, make the world a better place. And with that, a very, very warm thank you to all our panelists, to Hari, to Virginia, and to Apurva. I think you were phenomenal. I loved this panel. I learned so much. Thank you so much. And to all our attendees for being a wonderful audience. We keep doing these webinars regularly. If you're interested, all our panels and our webinars tend to be like this. All are authentic, all come from the heart, and some of the best speakers and the best practitioners of that particular art end up coming over here. So thank you for coming and attending this session with us. I think we had an unprecedented session. We crossed about 320 people live at one point of time. I think that's pretty cool. And really appreciate your energy and your insights and your attention. So thank you so much. Please have a wonderful day, and please be safe, and wish you a wonderful, wonderful week and month ahead. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.